I was fast asleep when my baby's cries woke me. After soothing him back to sleep, I heard the front door creak open. My husband Steve was home. But this time, his footsteps sent a shiver down my spine. Something felt off, and I couldn't shake it. I instinctively went into bed, closed my eyes, and pretended to be asleep, hoping for that sweet forehead kiss he usually gives me when he comes in late. It had become our little ritual, his way of saying goodnight without waking me. But tonight, instead of feeling the warmth of his lips on my skin, I heard him muttering into his phone. At first, I dismissed it as a work call. Steve is a computer specialist, and he often takes late-night calls with colleagues who are just as obsessed with technology as he is. Their conversations are usually filled with jargon and tech lingo that I don't understand, so I tuned it out and tried to drift back to sleep. But then, his words cut through the haze of sleepiness like a knife.
I hid the fingers in the box. We just need to find the head.
My eyes shot open in the darkness. Did I hear that correctly? My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Maybe he was talking in riddles, using some obscure metaphor that only his tech-savvy colleagues would understand. But as I lay there, my heart began to pound in my chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. Something about his tone was different. Darker, more sinister. I held my breath and listened as the conversation continued, hoping I had misunderstood. But the next words out of his mouth turned my growing unease into sheer terror.
Did you find any credit cards or cash we could use? My mortgage is due, and you know the drill.
What on earth was he talking about? My stomach churned as a wave of nausea hit me. Was this some kind of sick joke? Had I married a man capable of, fraud? Or even worse, theft? My mind couldn't even process the possibility that the man I shared my life with could be involved in something criminal. As the conversation went on, my hands began to tremble uncontrollably, gripping the bedsheet as if it were the only thing tethering me to reality. I could feel the blood draining from my face as his words became more horrifying with each passing second.
This is bad news. I guess we need to move on to the old man next door. His net worth is about 10 million. He'll be an easy kill. What? Oh man, what are we gonna do? My wife's life insurance needs 6 months before we skin her.
I froze, unable to breathe, my entire body paralyzed by fear. Was this a nightmare? Should I wake up and confront him? But what if it wasn't a joke, and he really planned to harm me? I felt like waking up and running, but I couldn't move. My heart raced like a runaway train, threatening to leap out of my chest as I weighed my options. After what felt like an eternity, the call ended, and I heard him set his phone down on the nightstand. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel him moving closer to my side of the bed, and I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't notice that I was awake. I could sense him standing over me, his presence looming like a shadow, and I could barely contain the rising panic inside me. Then, I felt his hand gently push my hair away from my face, the way he always does before giving me that goodnight kiss. But instead of the usual warmth, all I felt was cold dread. The thought of what he might do next filled me with a terror I had never known before. As he leaned in, I snapped. Adrenaline surged through me, overriding my fear. Without thinking, I shot out my hand and punched him square in the face. My fist collided with his nose, and he stumbled back in shock. I heard everything you said. You murdering criminal, sick psychopath. I screamed, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and fear. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, and I felt like a wild animal cornered, ready to fight for my life. He looked at me, stunned, his eyes wide with confusion.
Babe?
Don't you babe me, you bloody animal. I yelled, my voice cracking. I heard everything. You'll never skin me alive, I'll fight you. I held out my arms, shaking with rage and fear, my hands balled into fists. I must have looked ridiculous standing there like an amateur boxer who had never thrown a punch in her life. But I didn't care. I was ready to defend myself against this monster I had unknowingly married. To my surprise, he started laughing. Not a nervous chuckle, but a full-blown hysterical laugh that echoed through the room.
Babe, that wasn't a real call.
He managed to say between gasps of laughter. I glared at him, my mind refusing to accept what he was saying. You can't fool me. I've watched too many crime dramas to be fooled by a creep like you. I spat back, grabbing the nearest object, a baby's rubber toy, and hurling it at him. It hit him square on the forehead, but he just kept laughing, shaking his head as if I were the one who had lost my mind.
Babe, I knew you were pretending to sleep, so I made a fake call to prank you.
He said, still chuckling. Prank? My blood ran cold as the word sunk in. Prank? He thought this was funny? I stood there, my whole body trembling with shock, anger, and humiliation. How could he think this was some kind of joke? My mind was already traumatized from what I had overheard, and now he was telling me it was all a game? I don't believe you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm calling the police.
Seriously, cut it out.
He pleaded, realizing now that I was dead serious.
It was a joke and I'm sorry. Please, babe, just put the phone down.
But I didn't listen. I was too far gone, too terrified to believe anything he said. I moved closer to my handbag, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. My hands shook as I pressed the buttons, my eyes never leaving him. Each time he took a step closer, I screamed, warning him to stay back.
911, what's your emergency?
The operator's calm voice crackled through the speaker. Hello, police? I said, my voice shaking. I have a psychopath in my house.
Okay, ma'am, are you hiding in a safe place?
The operator asked, her tone suddenly serious. No, I replied, glaring at my husband. I'm standing right in front of him.
Is the suspect armed?
No, but he's a psychopath who wants to skin me alive. Please come to 37 Terrence Avenue now, I blurted out, my words spilling over each other in panic. As I hung up, I turned to face my husband, who was now looking at me as if I had gone mad.
This is crazy.
He muttered, shaking his head. You're crazy, I shot back, pointing at him. Stay where you are until the cops arrive. Minutes later, the police burst through the front door, guns drawn, ready for anything. They questioned him, checked his phone, and even asked me to recount what I had heard. But when they discovered that the last call he had made was to me earlier that day, everyone looked at me as if I had lost my mind. They gently suggested I might be suffering from postpartum depression, and while I insisted I was fine, the look in their eyes told me they didn't believe me. After they left, my husband stood there, shaking his head, a mix of guilt and amusement in his eyes.
Babe, I'm sorry. I swear I'll never prank you again.
And he didn't. He never joked like that again, knowing that the line between humor and horror can be razor thin. The lesson here? Don't play tricks like that on your wife, ever.